The format of this meeting is a 10-minute speaker, a coffee break, and then a main speaker. For tonight, our first speaker is Ryan.
Ryan, alcoholic. Ryan. Thanks, Alan, for asking me to speak. I didn't get a lot of time to prepare for this, but that's going to be okay. So I'm from Santa Barbara originally. I moved out here 4 years ago. I have a sponsor. He knows he's my sponsor, and I have a sobriety date, which is 4/2/21. I got sober at the beginning of COVID, and I wasn't necessarily the type when I was younger to really start drinking or doing drugs like crazily heavily or anything right away. It sort of started slow, and then eventually I started doing it every day until I would go to bed, and immediately once I would wake up, I remember going to basketball practice and smoking before basketball practice and sort of putting away everything I had and put drugs and alcohol ahead of that. If I had homework to do, I would smoke instead of do my homework. If I had sports practice, I would go to sports practice high and sometimes steal liquor instead of and putting that ahead of my obligations. And I was really headed down a bad path, and I probably should have gotten sober younger than I did, because I'm 31. I got sober when I was 28. And there's a lot of kids I know getting sober at a young age, and especially the ones in this meeting. And, thank goodness that you made it here, because if you weren't here, you might be out on the street, or there's only so many options we have as alcoholics. And if you're going to use or drink alcoholically, you're going to end up in psych wards or prisons or mental institutions. And for me, I definitely have been to a few of those, and that's not something I enjoyed about my life. For me, when my using and my drinking led me to be suicidal, and I basically couldn't quit no matter what I did. I was trying so hard to quit on my own without even really knowing what AA was. And it took me a long time to get into these rooms. But once I did, I found out that, there is a solution, and the solution is, God helping others, the book, and, just the fellowship. So for a while, I struggled. Like they say, it gets harder before it gets easier in recovery. And so the beginning's going to be rough. And I'm glad, there's newcomers here tonight. Just know that the rooms are always open for you, and you can always come back, even if, something bad happens. And, I've had a lot of friends that I've met in the rooms that haven't necessarily came out on the right side of the process. Stuff happens, and things happen in life, gets complicated, and relapse is a part of a lot of people's story. And all you have to do is keep on trying and come back, and then hopefully you get it down the next time and work the steps properly, or get another sponsor, do whatever it takes to stay sober. For me, I went through a highly structured sober living, and that was a good way to learn the foundation of recovery and get an accelerated start to everything I needed to stay sober. And I guess I probably wouldn't have found my way into the rooms if it weren't for the sober living I went through, because I didn't even really know what AA was when I had first gotten sober. I thought it was something only for, alcoholics or people who didn't have drug issues. And really what identifying as an alcoholic means is that you have these, like, a mental obsession, and you can't do things like the correct way without drinking or using. And for me, I couldn't really do anything without drinking or using, but I guess like going to meetings has really helped me in getting commitments at meetings. I started out with the greeter commitment. That's always a good commitment to get if you're new. At a men's stag, I had that, and then slowly moved it up to like treasurer, and I've tried to be secretary at a few meetings, but never quite worked out. So hoping for that in the future. And the world's changing so much that when I was younger, the drugs weren't as hard as they were now. So you got to be really careful with the stuff out there. And so that's why this program has evolved to a point where we're saying that, like, it's either you get this or, you could potentially die. And so, I'd gone to a fancy college and, basically partied like almost every day and dropped out. And I had to learn the hard way that, like, alcoholism can really, kick you in the butt and send you into this psychosis or like physical injuries. It can do so many things to your body. But I guess, what's helped me the most is probably being of service, I would say, because without being of service, you're not really helping someone else out. And, like the 12th step is to share your experience with other alcoholics. And I've sort of struggled to find sponsees, and I know the right one is going to pop up when it presents itself. But right now I'm just focusing on, giving rides to people to meetings, and, like opening the door for people at the gas station, or you can help out people outside of the program and still be actively, doing service, which is cool. And for a lot of people, the fellowship really does help them stay sober at first. I would say I struggled to find my right crowd at the beginning because I was a little bit older for the sober living I went to, but it worked out for the best. And sometimes I struggle going to young people's meetings because I'm 30 and I have to find the right crowd. But I just sort of put one foot in front of the other and keep on walking until I find whatever works. And once you find the thing that works, you'll know when you found it. And the promises have started to come true. My relationships with my friends and family are amazing. Have great people around me that are sober, which without them I wouldn't have the support system I need. My sponsor, he gives me the right direction whenever I'm looking for it. I feel like I have a great relationship with my higher power. And I guess, so whenever I'm struggling, I always seem to just pray to God, because like God's a big part of recovery, right? So when what I look for in a relationship with my higher power is someone that I can almost look to as like a friend, or like someone who doesn't just like make all my wishes come true, but someone who I can relate to and will accept me for all of my defects, so and your higher power can change over time. It doesn't have to be one thing, but for a lot of people, like for me, I know it's a sort of a joke, but like it was the doorknob for a while, because I did struggle with a higher power. And a doorknob, like I can touch it all the time, and then it developed into like my sense of right and wrong, and now it's sort of just the earth in general, which I can relate to on a everyday sort of practice, like pretty much everything on the earth, like humans and this building or like grass or whatever, so I can see that all interacts with each other and forms one giant sort of I don't know, like circle basically. But yeah, I mean, I'm really grateful to be here tonight, and this meeting has been important for my sobriety, and I encourage all of you, to just take it one step at a time and not look any more forward than today, and talk with your sponsor on a daily basis, and get to know whoever your higher powers. So thanks for letting me share.
Thank you, Ryan, for speaking. We will now have a 10-minute coffee break. Please return to your seats quickly and quietly when you hear the bell ring to allow our main speaker the time and respect she deserves. At 8:10 after break. Okay, wait, never mind. Yeah. And now please join me in the welcoming our main speaker, Rick from Long Beach.
Hi everybody, my name's Rick Yoakum and I'm an alcoholic. I brought my own bottle. I used to always do that. It suggested that I share in a general way what it used to be like, what happened, and what it's like now. I got sober May 7th, 1978. I was 31 years old, so there's hope. And I just will celebrate this year, or next year, I'll celebrate 47 years. Now, I understand you have a 46-year limit. They had to get permission for me to come tonight because the guy that recommended me thought I had 47. Anyway, some of the facts, I had to look it up this morning, but I've been sober 16,981 days. That's a lot of time. Considering when I got here, I wasn't an alcoholic. I wasn't. I just couldn't cope with life. Anyway, I was born and raised in Buffalo, New York. That alone was a good reason to drink for a long time until it didn't work anymore. And then my entire life, I always felt different. In kindergarten, I was about a foot taller than the other kids, so my toys were bigger than most kids. And so as a result, nobody wanted to play with my toys, and they wouldn't let me play with theirs. And so I knew I was different. And I knew you guys had the secret code. You got the decoder ring in the cereal box. I didn't. And you guys seemed to be what I looked at, coping with life on life's terms, and I had no idea what that meant. I just know that I wasn't dealing well. Some of the red flags that my parents should have saw early on in life is that I have a toothache, Dad would get the Q-tip out and stick it in some brandy and rub it on my gums. I'd suck that cotton ball off the stick every time. And then there were days when I would just rub my gums because I didn't want to have a toothache. And I also used to, this was back in the day, in the olden times. There was a commercial out, it was Schlitz beer. Grab all the gusto you can. Well, I was a pig, so I grabbed it with both hands. And then there was Dow Chemical, which was better living through chemistry, my mantra. And I tried both of those till they damn near killed me. And struggled with life. I was told I had a lot of potential. I still don't know what you do with that. There's nowhere on any application, no FICO score, no home application, no loan that potential gets you anything but a lecture because I wasn't living up to it. And So I had no idea what that meant. I knew how to lower the bar to achieve my goals. And trust me, at the end, I was falling over those goals, and I still just couldn't cope. Dad was a hard-working guy. He worked hard, he played hard. He drank, but I didn't see a lot of abuse or anything like that. My mom she worked, she was hardworking, and they tried to give me everything that I needed. Not necessarily what I wanted, but they always gave me what I needed. And that wasn't enough. I don't know why. I just was always looking for something. Emotionally, Timmy fell in a well, and Lassie come home to tell Mom, and I'd cry. Bambi got hurt, I cried. Spoiler alert, they shot Old Yeller, I cried. And most of you kids don't even know what that Old Yeller was. But anyway, and my dad would just say, would you stop that? Men don't cry. And so I finally learned how to stuff those feelings. And then I was 18, and in New York you could drink at 18. Like I said, I was tall, so I was getting served in the bar when I was 17. And I thought, that's what a man is. I remember my dad giving my first scotch and water, and I fired that down, and I thought I saw a moment of acceptance for the first time in my life. My dad and I connected. And I remember sometime later, I was sick one night. I was hungover, and I'm puking in the toilet, and he walks by, and I looked up at him, and I said, occupational hazard, and he chuckled. And I thought, I'm in the canoe club. I'm one of the boys. And but I still didn't feel like I was part of anything. I didn't have a lot of close friends. I didn't trust anybody. And my mom was probably the only person I could talk to. Now, not that I did, but she was the only person I felt like I could. She died when I was 18. And my life kind of flipped upside down. I was supposed to go off to college, and I looked at my dad, and I said, I don't know what to do. He says, your mom wanted to go to school. Why don't you go to college? And so I went to college. He set me up with an account at the bookstore. And I remember the comment at the end of that year when he picked me up. He said he thought he was going to need a U-Haul to bring the library home that I bought. Now, what I would do, because I ran out of money and I needed drinking money, so I'd buy books and I'd sell them to you for a discount. It was not in my pocket, and I did that the entire year. And I only had one book that I couldn't sell because it was the last book of the day and nobody needed it. And so I used to have that book for the longest time. I don't know whatever happened to it, but I lost it. I wish I had it today as a reminder. But all I did was drink in college. I got a good solid D, and I was on academic probation. And unfortunately, Vietnam was going on at that time, and my exemption didn't hold up. And so I got a draft notice, and that scared the bejesus out of me. And I remember talking to Harold down at the gas station, and I told him, I said, I just got my draft notice, and I don't want to go, and I don't know what to do. And I lived in Buffalo. Canada was right across the border. And I didn't even have the courage to run away from home. And this guy stuck his head between her. He said, I'm a Navy recruiter. Have you had your physical yet? And I said, yeah. And he says, come with me. And he took me down to his office, swung some kind of deal, and within 21 days, I was off to the Navy. And Dad said, thank God you got in the Navy, at least you can get a trade out of this. So off I went to Great Lakes. I remember putting that uniform on, and there used to be a poster, and it was Boston Pier with Old Ironside, the sailing ship, and this sailor with his crackerjack hat on, holding a hand of a little boy. And I thought, now that's a real man. Now when I left the ship every day in that uniform, that's exactly how I felt and looked. Didn't look like any of that when I'd come home at night, because I'd come back drunk, and I'd be tattered and torn and just crawling on my hands and knees. But that was okay, because that was part of the deal. And alcohol did for me what I couldn't do for myself. It filled that hole, made me feel smarter, more handsome, quicker, you name it. I just felt better once I had some drinks in me. But it was short-lived, and I wasn't into chemicals at the time. But I remember one day a guy handed me some crosstops. Now that's pharmaceutical grade speed. And I remember taking them all. And I looked at him, I said, so what's going to happen? And his eyes got about this big, and he said, I don't know, because I've never seen anybody take that many at one time. So for the next 96 hours, I was moving. And then I realized that drugs and alcohol were the answer. And they got me through for a long period of time. Now, I got in the Navy. I was in there for 4 years. I got out, got married. We went back to Buffalo, and everything was going good. She got pregnant. We have a baby. And the pressure was on one more time. What do I do now? I don't know how to be a dad. I don't even know how to be a father. I don't know how to be a husband. I don't know how to be anything. And had this great thought. I'll go to the Air Force recruiter, because they were talking about guys re-enlisting, and the Air Force guy says, we got no need for your talent. Once you go back to the Navy, they'll probably give you a bonus for signing back up. So I went back in the Navy, did a geographic. Came out to San Diego, had orders to go to Hawaii, and everything was wonderful. Sent my per diem checks home all the time, so she was well taken care of. I had plenty of money to drink. No, by the way, it was poor me now, because I'm all alone out here in California, and the family's back east. And so I drank every night, and just still not trying to figure out what life was all about, and it just wasn't clicking. And I got stationed on a new ship down in Mississippi, Pascagoula, Mississippi, and so I went down there, and I didn't go to Hawaii, got my orders changed, so I was down in Pascagoula. At that time, there was a couple of guys, I used to see them at the bar all the time, because we had a bar in the barracks. Navy took care of us. And these two guys, every night, it was about 5 o'clock, 5:30, they'd come in, sit at the end of the bar. I thought they were drinking screwdrivers. They were just drinking orange juice. And as they walked by, they'd say, I'm saving you a seat. Now, I had no idea what they were talking about, because I had my seat. I sat at the bar. Now, we also had a dispensary in the canteen down there at the barracks. And for a quarter, you could punch the PBR button, and you get 12-ounce can of Pabst Blue Ribbon beer. And that was my breakfast of choice. Now, I didn't realize it, but I was really spiraling down now, and I didn't understand why. I just couldn't cope with life. And this went on for a couple more years of drinking and that. I re-enlisted, got a bonus. We bought a house out in Spring Valley, California. The baby's about a year old now, and things should have been good, and they weren't. I'm paranoid. I can't leave the house. I'm lying. I'm telling I'm working. I was working on, oh, by the way, I'm working on nuclear submarines and on a top secret clearance. And shortly, just moving forward, my wife decided, she'd been going to counseling, and she decided her and the baby were going to leave. They were tired of watching me kill myself. No offense, but there was two thoughts that went through my head at that time. Thank God I'm free. The bitch is leaving me when I need her the most. And I got into a pity pot. And by the way, we were the best of friends after I got sober, but we did get divorced. But I turned myself into the Navy and asked for help. And they Miranda'd me. And then they Miranda'd me a second time, and they said, you understand, you signed documentation that in big, bold, black letters, falsification of these forms constitutes $25,000 fines and 5 years in jail. Now, I'm an alcoholic. I didn't just sign those forms once. I signed them like 4 or 5 times. So I should have, if they were going to, and they assured me they were going to investigate and possibly prosecute. Now, the problem what we discovered was I don't remember working on those nuclear submarines for at least 2 months prior to this. My signature stated we had tested the system, and the system was safe to go, and these guys could go out on that submarine and do what they had to do without fear of the system failing. They had to pull 3 boats off patrol. I should still be in Leavenworth based on that alone. Now, I had that hanging over my head when I got help. Now, the other part of this thing was the Navy was pissed at me, and they said that they'd give me help. Now, I turned myself in on May 8th or 9th, I think it was. 70 days later, I got into detox. Now, that's the way the Navy works in mysterious ways. But from the day I first turned myself in and asked for help, something happened and something changed that I can't explain. I don't know why it happened that way, but it did. There was a guy on the ship that his name was Ray. Ray was from Texas. Ray was bald, had no front teeth. He was going to help me. I remember talking to Ray. Well, actually, Ray was talking and I was crying. And he's telling me about Alcoholics Anonymous and the good things that have happened in his life. And I'm looking at him and I don't understand what he's talking about. The great thought that I had was that I was going to look for Copers Anonymous. I had heard about AA and I'd heard about recovery programs because a year earlier I got a drunk driving charge. In the Navy, they got to reduce the reckless driving, probation, and a short fine. But I knew I wasn't an alcoholic. I knew all the facts. In fact, I got a certificate from the University of Florida saying that I'm an expert in alcoholism. So I knew I could point it out to you. You got a problem. Not me. I just couldn't cope with life, and drugs and alcohol just weren't working right now. So they told me that, I'm going to have to go into rehab and so forth. So the keen intellectual mind here finds out where the druggy buggy goes. So I find out where all the meetings are that the rehab goes to, and so I started going to those meetings. So on the 70th day when I come in with the group, no, actually it wasn't because I had to go 2 weeks I was restricted to the barracks for 2 weeks for detox. Now, again, I hadn't drank in 77 days, so I was dry as a bone, but the regulations, and so I had to do that. But I started going to the meetings again, and now I was part of your groups already. I had already led me those meetings, and so everybody was looking at me like, oh, Rick knows what the meetings are all about, so check with him. So I was kind of a big shot, but I'm still looking for Copers Anonymous, because I know that's where the answer is. You guys have a drinking problem. I read the book. You guys, I wished I could have been an alcoholic. You're the luckiest people in the world. Put the plug in the jug, and your life changed. You started winning the lottery, and you got her back or him back, and the career came along, and yada, yada, yada. It read like Think and Grow Rich or something to me when I read the 12 and 12. And then when I read the big book, it seemed like it was all success stories. And I just wished I could have been an alcoholic. But I stuck around, and I was just sober down in San Diego. And I got switched to the afternoon shift on a subtender. I was still working on that subtender. And so I was going to, there was a Lano club down there in Pacific Beach called the, I forgot what it is now. There you go, North Shores Alano Club. And they had a restaurant in it. And so every morning I'd have breakfast and then lunch, and I'd go off to work and then come back, have dinner, and then go off to a meeting. And there was this one guy, and he'd always start over there, and I'd be over here, and by hour later, we were sitting at the same table. And Don always seemed to be able to read me. He says, so how you doing, kid? I'm doing fine. And he says, I see you got your Adidas on. And I go, what are you talking about? I'm all dressed up. I got a suit on and going to the meeting. And he says, yeah, but he said, you run in at the last minute, and you run out right at the end of the meeting. And I'm like, yeah, I know, but he said, you got to stick around. Let the magic happen. And I started feeling, for some reason, he could read me, and that was for the first time in my life I experienced something like that, and it scared me at first. But then also, I realized that I could be honest with him. I hadn't been honest with anybody my entire life, and he was the first person I could be honest with. And so he became my first sponsor, and I remember putting him through all the drills, and I'd call him, because he said, call me if you ever have a problem. I'd call him, give him the problem. He'd hum and haw, and he'd be going through the book, and I could hear the pages ruffling. He said, why don't you read page 127, second paragraph? He said, maybe that'll help you out. I go to page 127, second paragraph, read it. That wasn't the hell of a question I gave him. I don't know what he's thinking. Maybe it was the first paragraph. Maybe it was the third. Maybe it was the other page. I held that book in front of the mirror. I looked for a cipher. I knew there was an answer somewhere in there, but I couldn't find it. We did this dance for 2 years. Because pride and ego, first off, I forgot what the question was, so I couldn't call him up and say, hey, Don, you gave me the wrong page, And he says, because I knew what he was going to say. He says, well, what was the problem again? I don't remember what the problem was. I'd forgotten it already. And it wasn't a problem anymore, obviously. We did this for 2 years. One day I'm over at the house, and Rob calls. Rob's got a problem, and Don's getting ready. We're going to a meeting. And Don says, look at my big book. I'm looking for his big book. Where the hell is it? It's right there, dummy, on the coffee table. It's a red-covered book. I got a blue-covered book. His was the first edition. I had a third edition. They're off by 10 pages. So if you're new here tonight and you think the book's a piece of shit, it's okay. Just read 187 and just focus on it because you'll forget what the problem is. I'm here, and I asked him, I went back, I said, how could I possibly stay sober for 2 years without any answer? He says, you were willing. And that's all we ever ask of you is be willing. Just be willing to try something different. Because whatever you're doing, you wouldn't be here tonight if it was working. And I've never seen anybody come through the door saying, I won the lottery. I'm a billionaire. I don't need you anymore. No, they've probably done that, but we haven't seen them ever again either, Or they come back a couple years later and broke, But alcoholics. But anyway, the adventure began, and I remember whining one day to him, why? Now, we were talking about this earlier, about commitments. One meeting, the first meeting I went to, they used to smoke, even in the schools. and they needed an ashtray washer, and I didn't smoke. And I said, why are you picking on me? He says, why not? Somebody's got to do it. It might as well be you. He said, it's not rocket science. You just clean them and put them in the rack. Well, the problem with that is you're the last guy out of the building, and everybody's already gone off to Denny's. We used to all go, after the meeting, we'd go off for coffee and whatnot. And so by the time I got done and got the ashtrays dried and put away and that stuff, and I get to Denny's, you guys are all going home already. Because we hit and run. We're quick like that. But anyway, I asked him, I said, how do they stay sober? And he said, you were just willing enough to do something against your better judgment. That's the way he used to put it. And then one day he was just sick and tired of it all. And he says, look, he said, kid, what'd you do to get drunk and loaded? I didn't even think. Flippantly, I said, whatever it took. And I said it just being condescending and that. And he says, good. Do the same thing for sobriety. And he let me hang on that for a minute. Now, I don't know about you, but I sold my soul to get drunk and loaded. I did whatever it took. And he just told me to do the same thing for sobriety. And he watched me sweat. He let me sit there for a minute, and he said, I can make you a promise. If you do that, you'll never have to make any kind of an amends for being sober. Never have to apologize for being an alcoholic. In the last 46 years, I haven't had to do any of those things. I've also gotten rid of the prayer. I had 2 prayers, actually. Oh, God, what am I going to do now when I came to? And the other one was French, and it was F it. I just can't go on anymore. I don't want to live. Now, I haven't had to use those prayers in 46 years either. Because everything that you've told me would happen has happened. Well, I've relived my entire life. All the things that I had to drink over, I've gone through every one of those things in sobriety. And not once did the drink sound like an option or a choice or a solution. Now, there have been times when I wanted to get rid of sobriety, and I've tried throwing the towel in, but early on I also heard get in the middle of the hurt. I don't know what the hell that was supposed to mean. And because I didn't want to commit to things. You get in the middle of the herd, you get to commit a lot of stuff. You pick me up, or you're going to be here, we're going to go do this, or we're going to that meeting, or we're going to do something. So I was always out on the outside edge because I didn't want to have to commit to anything, and it got me in the middle of that herd. So every time I've tried to throw the towel in, somebody in the herd said, not today, sucker, and they just pulled the towel out of my hand, and we're going to trudge. And that's happened a couple times in sobriety, and I'm not proud of it, but they are the indications that this is a sneaky disease. And now, never once have I ever thought about drinking. The best story I can tell is I was about 20, I think I was 20 years sober. I was working full-time, doing AA full-time, married, and I was going back to school full-time. Alcoholics, we don't do anything. And I was going full-time. I wasn't just taking a class here and a class there. I was going full-time. So I was getting about 2-3 hours of sleep a day. And I was probably 8 hours away from finishing my last class. It was a Saturday, and we were there all day. And at the first break, I got up and I was heading down the hallway, and I could see my truck. And as I'm walking out, this one professor that I liked, he stepped in front of me and said, "Excuse me, can I talk to you?" And I go, "What do you want?" And he says, "You're a friend of Bill W.'s, aren't you?" And I go, "Yeah. What about it?" And he says, "I need to talk to you." And he pulled me into an office, and he says, "I'm celebrating 13 years today. And my wife handed me divorce papers this morning." And he said, "I want a drink." He says, "Would you meet me for dinner after class?" And I said, sure. And we went to dinner, and we're talking and yucking it up and all of that stuff. And he felt better, and I felt better. And he says, "By the way, where were you going when he interrupted you?" And I said, "I was going to get my truck." He says, "Really?" And I said, "Yeah, I was going to drive east." That's the thought I have, get in the truck, drive east. Anybody that's driven east knows that once you leave San Bernardino County, it's all desert for the next 2-3 days. So you would have to be, you'd have to get thirsty and have to get beer. But I never planned the drink, but I always planned on getting in the truck and just throwing the towel in. Now, I had the same thing happen when I came back some years ago. My daughter moved to England, and I moved over there with the intent of staying with her. Well, after my visa expired, I had to leave, and I couldn't find any reason to stay in England. And in England, I had a ball. That was a lot of fun over there, because my sobriety early on, we were always in traveling groups, going to meetings. I was in San Diego. We'd go up to Carlsbad, go to the Thursday night Carlsbad workshop, and then they'd come down to the Tuesday night Nutmeg meeting, and then we'd go up once a month. We'd go up to the Pacific Group meeting, and we were always traveling around and that stuff. So when I got to England, I was at my first meeting, and 4 or 5 guys came in, and they all had 2, 3, 4 years of sobriety. And we're all talking and that, and they picked up on my accent. They said, "You're a Yank." And I go, "Yeah." And at that time, I think I had 38 years of sobriety. So they wanted to drag me around England and introduce me, and they did. I got to go to meetings every day in England. And my daughter, I remember, she called me one day. She said, "Dad, you doing all right? You came over here and lived with me, and you don't have any friends." And I said, "Sweetie, I'm having a ball." But she said, "You're going to so many meetings." And I go, "Yeah." I said, I'm the shiny penny. Everybody wants to hear the Yank share. So I literally was up and down the coast of England, and these guys, they were a blast. And it was the best 8 months I ever had over in England, because I got to see Alcoholics Anonymous over there and how they do it. And I remember, because I use my last name, Rick Yoakum, I'm an alcoholic. And I remember they cornered me at the end of the meeting and said, "We don't use our last names here." And I said, "I understand that." I said, "But I've been using my last name for 38 years. I'm not about to change it now. So either deal with it, or I'll go find a different meeting." So they got to tolerate me for about 8 months. The Yank, the rebel, the whatnot, the tyrant. But Alcoholics Anonymous showed me a way to live that I had no idea how to do those things. I didn't know how to care about another human being. And because you guys cared about me, I learned that from you guys. I couldn't love myself. You taught me how to love myself. I had this thing with God. If there was a God, I had a target on my back, and the last thing I wanted to do was find God, because he was going to zap me. That's the way I saw religion, and so I struggled with that. And then I remember Harriet coming up to me one day, and she says, "I know you're struggling with this God thing and finding spirit, a higher power." And I said, "Yeah, I just don't get it." She says, "Do you believe that we believe?" I said, "What do you mean?" She says, "You see us. You see that it's working for us. So what do you think? Could you believe that we believe?" And I go, "Yeah." She says, "That's all we need. That's all you need, is to be able to believe in something other than yourself." And then it got to the point where that first year I was really desperate to change. And there was one of those burning bush moments for me. It was a morning. I was going into the ship. San Diego Bay was smooth as glass. Orange sky coming up. It was warm. You could smell the diesel fuel and the dead fish. The seagulls were, and the seagulls and the seals were barking and squawking and that. And for the first time, and I don't know when, it was in living color. Now, I realized, it was like a Woody Allen movie. I realized that my life for so long was just black and white. And that morning, it was in living color, and I started crying. And that was the beginning of, I think, for me, that was the turning point. Now, I don't think I was going to get in the truck and drive east that day, but I was really struggling with this thing. And because I didn't think I was getting it. Everybody else seemed to be getting it. He was getting the girl back. She was getting a job. They were getting careers. Everything was happening but me. And one of the things that was pointed out, and I have to point it out to the guys that I work with today, is that we usually don't see the growth in ourselves. We see it in other people. But you got to keep coming around to see that happen first. That's the first miracle. And then you get a chance that people come up and say, you know, Rick, there was a time when we'd say something that, boy, you would just lose it. You don't lose it anymore. What happened? And I said, it's got to be the program. It's got to be something happening in the program. Another instance early on in sobriety was, it was Father's Day, first year Father's Day. I was maybe 2 months sober again, May, June. I think Father's Day is in June, so I was probably 6 weeks sober. And I sure wasn't feeling like much of a father. And I remember going to the Pathfinders Alano Club down in Chula Vista, and it was a Saturday, and there was nobody there. The manager was in the back office doing something. He says, coffee pots in the kitchen, get a cup of coffee, and there's a big book on the table. This was a blue cover, by the way. So I sit down, and I open up the book. Somebody written on there, acceptance, page 449. I had no idea what that meant. I went to page 449. Remember, tell me a page, I'll read it. And I read about acceptance. And I read it, and I started to cry. And I didn't even understand it at the time. I had no idea what that meant, but I read it, and something hit me. And I've been reading that paragraph for 46 years now. I'm one of those unicorns. I got sober May 7th, and I haven't gone back out. I haven't tested the waters. I let you guys do that. Some of us are insistent upon trying that. And I don't put them down because I understand this is a disease that's cunning, baffling, and powerful. I don't have a chance against that thing, and I have to stay close. But sobriety was, and I just lost my train of thought. But anyway, I read that paragraph, and then I actually somebody one day said, "Why don't you read the whole story? It's really interesting." You know, so I read the whole story, and I got to learn about Paul and Max, and I go, "Wow, that's interesting." And he was interesting. And then I was at a meeting one night. It was a speakers meeting. Okay, thank you. I was at a speakers meeting, and speaker's talking, and he was kind of short and kind of a weaselly voice. I'm listening to him, and all of a sudden he talks about Max. And my eyes lit. I realized this is Dr. Paul. And he had written a story in the big book. So I remember at the end of the meeting, I went up and shook his hand. Now, I got to know Paul, and I used to meet Paul probably 5-6 times a year over the years and that stuff. And he actually showed me what acceptance was all about. And what I've come to realize, because I also had a sponsor that made me get a dictionary, because he says, you have no idea what words mean in that book. And I said, what do you mean? He says, you think humility and humiliation are the same. And I said, well, yeah. He says, they're not. They're literally the opposites. He said, you need to acceptance doesn't mean you have to like it. And so I started to learn what this was all about and what you guys were dealing with. I don't have to accept the fact that it's Saturday night, but it is, so I might as well. I can't change it. I can't make it Friday, and I can't make it Sunday, because I used to live that way too. I don't know about you, but I was either wishing I could go back or hoping that tomorrow was going to be different, and it never was until I got sober. Because now I just live in the day, and I just deal with the 24 hours that surround me, and that's what you guys taught me. Now, this God thing that I struggled with for the longest time, somewhere along the line, I got the gift of desperation, G-O-D. I've believed in a group of drunks, G-O-D, and today I live with a good orderly direction, G-O-D. I didn't realize it, but God's been in my life all along. I just didn't see it. Now, you guys have helped me with that, too. You've showed me, and you've taught me. You know, it's not like, I've got a master's degree. I read a book, took a test. They gave me a sheepskin. I'm an expert in education. I've been reading the big book for 46 years now, and it keeps changing. We were reading it this morning, and somebody keeps writing those paragraphs differently. I mean, my book is almost all yellow. Well, now it's switched to blue. So now it's yellow, green, and blue because there's a lot of things that overlap when I highlight the magic of the marker. But it's been a journey that's been beyond my wildest dreams. And it's because of people like you, people like this meeting. I've been to meetings halfway around the world and back. Thanks to Zoom, I have been to meetings in all time zones now. We actually do a morning Zoom meeting that is international because we got listed in. We've got guys that come in from England, France, Germany, and we've known each other now for 4 or 5 years. I've got to know people that, and everybody says, oh, Zoom is so impersonal. I said, I got to know things about people that Wes used to sit next to me at a meeting, and I didn't understand the thing Wes was saying because I'm deaf in this ear. And he talked to me all through the meeting and that stuff, and I had no idea what he was talking about. I know him better today than I do most of the friends that I had before that because we get to talk in Zoom today and we get face-to-face and eye-to-eye. This program is magical, and if you're new here, I want to welcome you home. You may not want us to be home. This was not on your top 10 things to do when I grow up. It wasn't on mine, that's for darn sure, and I'm truly grateful that it is today because I've got a chance today. I got a chance to do things that I never could do before. Some of the accomplishments, I mean, early on, I could remember going, some of you guys remember this, Riverside used to have a racetrack, and NASCAR used to race out there, and we'd go out there every time they raced, and we'd be in the center field and party all weekend, and I'd have to go read the paper Monday morning to find out how the race went, because I was drunk. I was there, you know, I had evidence because I'm sunburned and all of that, but I had no idea what happened. 2 years sober, I went up in the NASCAR booth as an official, counting the laps of cars, because they had literally at that time, they used to have counters. This is the guy that couldn't keep track of submarines, let alone do anything else, and now I'm tracking cars going around in a circle. You know, the responsibility was beyond my belief, you know, but it was because of Alcoholics Anonymous. You taught me how to be a man with integrity. When I say I'm going to do something today, I mean it. Or I'll tell you I can't. I don't have to worry about what you think of me. You know, that's, the program has taught me that, you know. I went back to school. My first boss wanted me to go back to school and become an engineer, and I didn't want anything to do with that for whatever reason. Now, I was telling earlier tonight, driving over here, I used to work over at Northrop, actually, then it was TRW. So, because I didn't know where this meeting was at, and I'm Googling it, and as I'm driving, I go, wait a minute. That's where I used to go to work every day. And so, again, that was a story right there real quick. I lost my clearances when I turned myself in. And when I got out of the Navy, I got out with 10 years. I just couldn't do it anymore. And I remember going for this job. They had invited me in for the interview. And I get there and we're talking. And we're going to be writing training materials for this defense contractor. And I'm not a writer per se, and I told him, I said, I'm not a writer. He said, I don't need you to be a writer. He says, you're the expert. You've been in that engine room. We're going to give you the materials, and you're going to read them and tell us whether they're valid or not. You're known as a subject matter expert. And I go, oh. So we go through, he's telling me what the job will be in that, and then he handed me this application, and I recognized it right away. That's the $25,000 fine, 5 years in jail application. And I said, we might as well stop right here. I said, I lost my clearances. I'll never get them back. He says, it just so happens this job doesn't need them. We'll just have to escort you anytime you're in the facility. So once again, I got a job that I wasn't qualified for because of the clearance, and yet they kept me there. 2 years later, everything's in twos. 2 years later, two guys in suits show up with this file and a camera and a recording device. And they start asking me questions. And you've all been there. They know what the answers are. Is my answer going to match their answer? Because they've been researching. They were trying to figure out, and this was at a time when spying for money was a big deal. And so they were concerned whether I had been compromised or not. I started connecting dots that they didn't even have reference points to. And so after 2 hours of interviews and 4 more hours of writing out a statement, they went off. And I started getting requests for verification that I've been going to meetings. And how do I verify? The sponsor says, send them a directory, tell them that, and then send them the pamphlet on anonymity also. And he says, you realizing that you can't identify anybody. Well, people stepped up anyway. They said, Rick will write your letters of reference. I ended up getting my clearances back. When I retired from Northrop, I got clearances that they can't take away because of the knowledge that I had and the presence that I had. Those were the gifts of this program, because my whole life is an open book today. There are no secrets, no skeletons anymore, and that's one of the rewards. We talk about peace and comfort. Trust me, when the phone rings and it's who's Alan, I could answer the phone today and say hello without a problem, not have to worry about it. If a car's following me, we're both going in the same direction. That's the difference today. I running out of time, but I'm truly grateful. And Alan, I'd like to thank you again for the invite. I know I wasn't the speaker that was supposed to be here tonight, but I was taught early on to never say no, and I had no excuse for not being here tonight. I normally would have been over at the Torrance Memorial or at the hospital over there at the meeting over there, but tonight I had an obligation, and I'm truly glad that I got here today. With that, I want to thank you all and have a great day.